Well, I'm just cleaning up here. I performed an initial experiment in which I wanted to fabricate a lotion based on a recipe that I found on YouTube, in which the only ingredients was water, borax, oil, beeswax, and heat, and mixing. And it was optional to add grapefruit seed extract at the end as a preservative. What I failed to do was follow the recipe. I tried leaving out the oil to see if I could get away with it, and I could not. The oil is essential. And the other thing I did was I replaced the water with colloidal silver water, and I'll give you an example. I make it regularly every day, so you can see the nice yellow color. That's my freshly made, I made this today, colloidal silver, and I'll show you why. See my owie? I was sleeping here, and just as I was waking up, I threw my hand up and over to the side and somewhere, I don't know where, and knocked it against something yesterday and made this owie. So you can see it's already beginning to dry up. It's starting to turn a dark red, maroon, whereas previous to now it was bright red, because I've been sealing it with beeswax, hot melted beeswax. And so I thought, well, that's nice, but got to come up with something better. So I looked for a lotion online that would combine, that would emulsify the beeswax. But you have to emulsify it in a base of oil. That's the trick. So let's get back to our setup here. So the gal says to use a hand mixer, which I have here. Here's the tip of the hand's mixer. And here's my block of beeswax that I had melted in this coffee mug in a pool of water inside my crockery pot to prepare it before I mixed it with the other ingredients. But as I say, I left out the oil and then mixed it afterwards, and I didn't measure anything. I just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and so what I got is a watery mixture, basically. If I can, well, I won't take it out. I only have one hand. I'll zoom in. So what I have here is an emulsion, but I also have water underneath. It's floating on top of the water. See? But it's an emulsion. That's the important thing. So it does work. The recipe does work. I just have to let this dry out, basically. It's a very dry environment. I live at the rim of a high desert in Southern California, so the air is extremely dry all the time. It's probably 30% humidity, I'm guessing. And so if I just leave that open, it'll lose its water content eventually. It might take a while. Anywho, I'd say that does a good job of sealing my wound. That was the whole point. I looked online. I found a reference to, was it Hippocrates or somebody else? Yeah, it might have been somebody else who knew the value of beeswax. Beeswax is antibacterial, and I'm trying to leave the wound, keep the wound open. I don't want it to seal over with a scab. I want to keep it moist. That requires water, not oil, and I want it to be moist in the presence of silver ions, so that's why I want to replace water with colloidal silver water, and I want it to be sealed from exposure to the air, which is what skin normally does, but I want an artificial seal, and I want beeswax as the sealant of choice. And borax ain't bad as an added ingredient, nor is oil for that matter, because oil is a bit of a sealant and kind of a disallower for bacteria, or at least yeast, because, you know, what's going to live in oil? There's no oxygen. There's no water, and so essentially anything in oil dehydrates. And of course, beeswax is antibacterial, and the silver is also antibacterial, and the silver helps regeneration. So I've got a nutrient for regeneration, and the exclusion, and the presence of water, and the exclusion of air, and the sealing of a wound. So hopefully, if I didn't hit this too late in the game, this should turn back into a fresh wound. If not, I'll well, when I take my bath again tomorrow, this was bright red when I came out of the bath this morning. I did it yesterday, I want to say noonish. Every day I take a bath, once a day in the morning, not in colloidal silver, but in a variation. I make a special variation. I make colloidal silver first, and then I add hydrogen peroxide, and then I add MSM, and then at the last minute in the bath I add cloves. You get to see some of my leftover cloves. I'm almost out. Oh, I got another bag I ordered. So, and then I put a special twist. Of course, I use distilled water to make my colloidal silver. I put a special twist in my machine. I place at the bottom of the beaker, maybe you can see it, a gold Krugerrand. And that seems to improve conductivity in the water batch such that it doesn't take so long for the silver to come off the wires, or I should say the electrodes, to shorten the session time for making the colloidal silver. And I would hope to imagine that it imparts a small amount of ions of copper and gold into solution in a homeopathic sense, because we don't need a whole lot of gold in the solution. Just a little goes a long way. Mostly we need the silver. But a little gold would be nice, and copper maybe, because gold has some therapeutic properties that silver does not possess, and that helps round out the protocol to have a little gold there. But not too much, because gold is sticky, it adheres to the flesh, it clogs the pores, and so we really don't want too much gold. So that's why we want a homeopathic amount of gold and no more. Mostly we want silver and lots of it, and for the purposes of wound care, I don't want it in the form of silver hydroperoxide. You know, colloidal silver reacted with hydrogen peroxide. I want it in the form of colloidal silver because silver hydroperoxide will burn. Not right away. Unlike hydrogen peroxide that'll burn right away, it'll just take longer, but eventually it'll burn, and not as severe either as hydrogen peroxide. It'll be a more milder burn. But still, if silver hydroperoxide burns, even to a minor degree, eventually over a long period of time, why would I want it? So that's why I use it in the bath, because it's short term. And it's very efficient. It's much more efficient than colloidal silver at getting ions of silver into the body and in a form in which they can move around beyond just a few millimeters, according to the literature on the internet. So colloidal silver is basically only stays where you put it, and you get the benefit where you put it, and you don't get it anywhere else. So if you want it somewhere else, you got to put it somewhere else to get the benefit somewhere else. But if you take it in the form of various oxides of silver, the ion, and if you don't have too much of it, such that it precipitates out of solution as particles of oxides of silver, so that you only have ions of silver dissolved in water, those oxide ions of silver have the ability to transport themselves throughout the physiology, throughout the tissues, and get past any barriers that are in their way very effectively. And for some reason, MSM helps boost the formulation, and a spice of some kind, either cloves or cayenne pepper, also help. Cloves are cooling, cayenne is heating, and this is the half of the year in which the sun is waning. The hours of the day of sunlight is waning. So according to Charlie Lutz, that's the solar path, the lunar path, the lunar half of the year between the summer and winter solstice. So I choose to bathe in cloves, not cayenne pepper. But on my wound, on my body, I place no spice, and I do not use silver hydroperoxide. I use colloidal silver, but I do use MSM. In this batch, I didn't put MSM because this was my first batch. So this was just monkeying around to see if I could get away without using any oil, and I see now that I must. So the deep green of grapeseed oil is now a light lime green color because it's emulsified. But there's also water underneath, so I'm going to have to transfer this to another container, a empty yogurt container, and use only the surface and work my way downwards until I get to the water, and then I'll throw away or reuse the water, probably reuse the water, I don't know. Maybe throw it away because I'll probably want to use a fresh batch of colloidal silver each time I make a new batch of this lotion. But next time I'll use the formula, the recipe. It's a gal online. Let's see if I can get her website, her YouTube channel, so you can see it. Well, that's odd. I never stopped this, darn it. So here's the 100% organic hand-poured beeswax, sold by Orange Casa. That is the best. But it comes in small quantity. So if you want something more than that, you get organic beeswax 1 pound block made in Texas from local beehives. And that's sold by Better Shea Butter, and that's what it looks like. It comes in a big huge block, 1 pound block. Well, while these are little 1 ounce blocks. And that's what it goes for. By the Beeswax Company. See, they ship you 5 ounces basically. Versus this other one. It comes as a singular block. They all smell like honey, I mean. So don't think it's, and that's for 22 bucks for the whole pound. So I got both because I knew I was going to run out. I used the small one for eating, to put in cooked dishes, you know, like a brownie, or better yet, macaroni and cheese. But the big one I use for body care. So this is still nice and moist. As you can see, it has a nice glistening appearance, but it's still this dark maroon. I don't know, I hope I get rid of that maroon because I'm not, probably tomorrow when I soak in the bath it'll turn pink red again, because the ingredients of the bath are different, and that helps open up the wound. We don't want the wound to seal. Actually, I should take another bath to, well, it may be too late. This may have sealed off. Yeah. See, I didn't have this formulation right away to put on it, and I didn't put the wax. I should have put the wax right away, even though I didn't have this lotion. Oh well. So that's my experiment, and hopefully I'll do a better job. So you can't let it dry out, not even for a few hours, because then you'll get this deep maroon, which shows I have a scab underneath. Because a scab is dried blood, and we cannot have blood cells die in the formation of a scab. We have to keep the wound fresh, bright pink, bright red, which indicates that all of the blood cells are alive. Because it's from those blood cells, the white blood cells in particular, the red is just an indicator of how fresh this wound is, or lacking in freshness at this point, because it's a maroon color, not a bright red color. But it's the white blood cells that will create stem cells. And so we have to keep this moist at all times. See, that's a maroon. It's not bright red. So hopefully if I keep this moist, the bright red will come back, but it probably won't. Not until I take the bath, because silver hydroperoxide is an oxidizer, and so it should burn through the scab, literally oxidize the scab, and get rid of it, and freshen up the wound, debride it basically, as Becker would describe. Dr. Robert O. Becker, MD, orthopedic surgeon, wrote The Body Electric, and that is where I get most of my material from. This is like has been my Bible, but it's a point of departure. Once you get the basics, then you know what to do. See, it sells cheap, only $10. It's a really good book. Chapter 7 and Chapter 8 are the best sections of all, but some of the other chapters, like Chapter 12 on the heart, are also interesting, 10, 11, and 12. But 7 and 8 are the main two chapters for you to focus on, to learn about Becker's technique. And then you go online and you learn about silver and colloidal silver, and there's another fellow, John Marshall Dudley, and Dr. Pramod Vora, and spaceage.com with a hyphen between space and age, because those two guys have managed to replicate Becker's regeneration of amputated limbs, getting back the entire what was lost, including the fingerprint and the nail, if it's a digit, you know, a finger, the tip of a finger or a thumb that was amputated. So it shows that they were successful in replicating Becker's research. So, that's my little ditty on experimenting with lotion, and I'll continue to keep you updated, but if there are any changes. Thank you for watching. Okay, I'm going to make another attempt to make a beeswax lotion, incorporating borax, which is the emulsifying agent, the alkali, used to emulsify the oil and wax combination into the water base. That's the basic lotion recipe. I'm going to leave out the preservative of grapefruit seed oil, or extract I should say, because I just refrigerate it, and that hardens the lotion anyway, which is just as well, because that way I'll be able to scoop with my finger very little to apply to a wound. So I skipped the preservative, but I'm going to be adding, or no, I'm going to be replacing the distilled the water with silver hydroperoxide, which I have over here mixing for the bath. I made it very rich, very thick, very high concentration. It's loaded with silver oxide particles suspended in the water, let alone dissolved in it. So I'm going to use that as my water base. It's mixing right now, so it keeps everything nicely suspended up, in solution instead of falling to the bottom, which could happen. And if that happens, then the silver starts to come out of solution, and you'll find splotches of silver metal at the bottom of your beaker if you make it this concentrated. I mean, the colloidal silver that I made this from was so concentrated that it had silver mud sitting on the bottom of the beaker as it was spinning. When I was making it with the electrodes and the colloidal silver generator machine, the $800 Pro 7 from silvergen.com. So when I put in the 60 cc's of hydrogen peroxide, not all at once, in 2 divided doses, a few hours apart, it created this white, milky mass. And so that's ideal, I think, for making a concentrated solution of lotion. I want lots of silver in the lotion. But I don't know what's going to happen. When I use the colloidal silver, not silver hydroperoxide, the colloidal silver came out and turned black when I heated it up in the presence of borax in my crock pot, which I'm using to make the lotion. So this time I'm going to use silver hydroperoxide, hoping that the oxide of silver will be more stable when combined with borax in solution, because somehow I have to make this alkali. I could use a hydroxide or an oxide of potassium or sodium, but the recipe for this beeswax lotion calls for borax, and borax has health properties. So I'm going to go with the lotion recipe still, continuing. I'm just tweaking my approach to see if I can avoid silver coming out of solution and blackening the lotion. So that's the water I'm going to use. The recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of water, so I'm going to use a 1/4 cup of this very richly endowed silver hydroperoxide. It calls for a tablespoon of beeswax, and I dirtied my tablespoon from yesterday. I scraped off most of the wax off of the tablespoon, but not all of it. And so what I did was I got a cup of water here with borax, and my first step is going to see if I can clean this by using the very emulsifying agent that I use in the lotion recipe to emulsify the wax and oil combination. So I'm going to see if I can emulsify as well as melt off the wax from this tablespoon. So I'm going to clean this first. That will be my first step. I'm going to immerse it in a pool of water in my crock pot and set the crock pot on low. That seemed to work yesterday. So plate warm is not good enough. Keep warm. Keep warm is not good enough, but low seems to be just right. So that's the setting I'm going to use for my $16 crock pot that I got from eBay. And I need a container to mix with the hand mixer. I'm going to, instead of using the whisk and attachment, which proved to be not very useful because it required a very large container to mix this in. And I'm trying to keep everything sized down because of the, it makes for dirty dishes. So why not just use the container I plan to store it in as my mixing vessel? It might work. So I'm going to use the smaller end attachment to mix everything up in. That'll work very nicely. It'll fit very nicely in here. That's probably why the instructions call for a stick blender. And I'm going to estimate. I'm going to use a knife to try to cut out, a tablespoon worth of wax that I have melted in chunky form into this mug. What else? I'm going to use coconut oil as my oil of choice because coconut oil usually solidifies at room temperature. This apparently is all liquid. So I guess it's fairly warm in here. I don't know. Well, I guess it is warm in here. What am I saying? And then I'm using borax from soapgoods.com. Granular. This is pentahydrate, so it doesn't dissolve that readily. But when it's heated up, it dissolves very nicely. But in cold water, it tends to solidify and not dissolve very well. I'm going to use, let's see, this was a distilled water base. I'm going to use tap water, because I have basically well water, as my pool of choice. You know, my pool of water, my double boiler situation, to heat everything up in my crock pot. So those are all my ingredients, and I just thought I'd let you know in advance what my intentions are. So I'm going to have MSM, which is what I know is good to have with silver hydroperoxide. Oh, so I'm guessing, since I normally use, and this is human grade, 99.9% purity, not horse grade. Normally, I would put a tablespoon of this per liter of silver hydroperoxide. So I scaled it down, since this is going to be 2 ounces, or a quarter cup of fluid from here. That works out to be 1/16 of a tablespoon. Let's say 1/12 instead of 1/16. Works out to be a quarter teaspoon. So I'm going to use a quarter teaspoon of MSM. And a quarter teaspoon is what the recipe calls for the borax to make. So it's a quarter teaspoon of each. Okay, so that's all so my first step is going to be to put water in my crock pot to see if I can clean the tablespoon from yesterday. And I see I didn't thoroughly clean my crock pot. I still have a wax or lotion ring around the perimeter, because I made it yesterday directly in my crock pot. So I have borax in the cup there along with water. I think I'm going to fill it up with a little bit more water. Okay, that should work. And I'll set it on low. There we go. And the lid, where's the lid? Get the lid. Practice makes perfect, right? And cook away. So that will be to clean my tablespoon. I'm not going to use the tablespoon, because I'm not going to pre-melt the wax. I'm just going to use a butter knife to cut it out of here and form a ball of wax, and use the tablespoon as my guide. In fact, I have another tablespoon I can use if I want to. I can use this one, and I can use either side. I guess I'll use the round side, and I'll use it to be my guide in formulating a ball that'll fit in here. But I don't want to put it in here, so maybe what I'll do is I'll use a sandwich baggie. You know, this is a fold-over top sandwich baggie, and I'll line it. So I can press it in here without worrying about dirtying the spoon. I'll just dirty the disposable sandwich baggie. So that'll work. So I'll cut this out, form it in my fingers, put it in there to get the shape right, to size it. And then I'll plunk it in. Let's see, now I need 2 different containers. I need 1 container. Alright, so I'm going to need a mug. 1 container to melt the oil and wax, and 1 to heat up the water. So I'll use this mug to heat the water, MSM, and borax. You know, the silver hydroperoxide water. And then I'll know right away, I'll do this first, I'll know right away whether or not I can mix borax with silver hydroperoxide, you know, and heat it up and see what happens. This should get interesting. But it'll have MSM in it, so the MSM might help to stabilize it. I don't know, who knows. Stabilize the silver to keep it in solution, we'll see. And if that works, then I'll go to the second step and put the half a cup of oil and the tablespoon of beeswax in here and heat this up, and this will remain warm. Once I get this heated up and the wax melted, then I'll pour the water into the oil and then immediately mix it. I think that's what I'll probably end up doing. So we'll see how it turns out. Well, I decided to make things easy for myself, so I've pre-mixed 2 tablespoons of MSM human grade 99.9% purity in the silver hydroperoxide ahead of time, so that I don't have to add it in addition to whatever else I'm doing. So now, it even got rid of some of the fizz. Some of the milky white condition was due to fizz being suspended in the water, or it had to do with silver suspended in the water, and the MSM helps to dissolve it, helps to raise the solubility of silver hydroperoxide in water. Whatever the case may be, I think it forced some of the fizzy out, is what I think happened. So when I'm ready, oh yeah, and I've pre-measured a 1/4 teaspoon of borax. It's down there at the bottom of the mug. So all I have to do is measure a 1/4 cup of the silver hydroperoxide. It's mixing now, so I think all the MSM is probably dissolved by now. So all I have to do is measure a 1/4 cup of that into here, and then put this. I may want to preheat this. Okay, so I'm going to put it in the crockery pot. When I get done cleaning off the tablespoon, I'll take that out, finish cleaning the tablespoon, and then I'll dry it off, and then I'll put this mug in there and heat it up so the mug will be warm. So when I put the silver hydroperoxide in there, it'll start to heat up right away. I might even choose to stir this, so let's see, I'll get a plastic spoon to stir it with. Plastic might not be such a great idea. Well, I shouldn't use silver. No, I should use wood. So let me find my wood spoon. If I can find it. It's already discolored, so I'll just use my wood spoon. I could use the handle. It's nice and small. Because if I use this, it might not, well, it might fit. So I'll use either end. So I'll use that. And I'll get my nice little ladle holder. You know, all these things you can get from the 99-cent store. That's what's so cool about the 99-cent store, is you can save a lot of money getting utensils. Okay, and be very neat and tidy, just like Grandma. Okay, taught me. So I'll be able to preheat this and put the water in it, and then we'll see if it turns black or not, or whatever, you know, what happens. And then we'll be able to know whether or not we can move on to the next step of measuring out the wax. Because I'm not going to go to the trouble of making this if I can't, you know, do it right the way I want to do it. I'll measure out a ball of wax in the size of a tablespoon pressed into this tablespoon that's lined with the silver baggie. I put the tablespoon inside the silver baggie. Inside the sandwich baggie. And I'm going to use this butter knife to carve out my wax. I already got some pieces that I got off the tablespoon from yesterday, and then I can measure a 1/2 cup of oil from this very bulk size container of coconut oil that I got. 1 gallon, oh my god. Yeah, it cost me, I forget what it cost me. I think it was $45. Yeah, it cost me $45 for that. I didn't know that's a gallon. So I figured, I knew I was going to make something, lotion, something. I just wasn't, you know, it was in the back of my mind, so I just grabbed it because I knew intuitively it was the right size of coconut oil to get. And I'm going to reserve the use of my edible oil, the grapeseed oil, for things like brownies or whatever else I'm going to cook. But the coconut oil, I specifically bought it for body use, body care. So I'm going to stick to that purpose. Now, this beeswax is not the more expensive organic beeswax that I bought that I want to reserve for eating. It's the cheaper variety of beeswax. It's actually very old. It's not the chunk I got from Texas. I don't know where I got this from, but it's 3 years old, so I figured I'd use this up first. So that I'm going to use for body care, that pound block. And so the pound block I got from Texas I'll use for body care as well. But this I use for eating. This is very sweet, very soft. So it tells me that the block was heated. That's why it looks a little denatured, because I think heat has denatured it so that they could make a big block out of it. and it's a different color. It's duller. It's not as bright orange as this is. That orange is actually keratin in there that the bee naturally secretes when it secretes the wax. But this is so soft you can break it off with your fingers. You can just smush it, squeeze it. It's really cool stuff, and tasty and aromatic. It's much more pungent and much more tasty and sweet smelling than the block varieties that you can get. But the block varieties I use for body care. It's cheaper. It comes in a bigger block, so that works out. So that's what I have in this cup for the most part. I do have a little bit of the edible, more expensive kind in here already, but I also have the block kind. That's the major amount. So this was the wrong way to go. See, I thought I was going to melt the wax in a container and then pour it into, measure it out with a measuring spoon, and it just makes everything dirty. So I'm going to use this up eventually and then clean it out. And now I know, just cut off chunks of this stuff and make in the size of a ball that will fit in a tablespoon, and mix everything in my storage container. This is a yogurt container that's I can't read the size on that. .28 ounces. It looks like it's 24 ounces. So it's 1 pound 8 ounces. Yeah, 1.5 pints. So it's not a full quart-size yogurt container. I would have wanted to use something smaller, but actually, no. If I'm going to be mixing with the hand mixer, I'm going to want something a little bigger than a pint-sized container. So hopefully this won't spill out. Yeah, I don't think so. A Greek yogurt container. I like to save all my yogurt containers. They come in really handy. Okay, that's how things are working so far. So I'm waiting for my tablespoon to heat up in a mug of borax and tap water so that I can clean it, or see if I can clean it. And plus I'm preheating the crock pot, getting it ready. So I'm kind of doing a couple things all at once here. Well, it did a so-so job of cleaning up the tablespoon. I had to use my finger, and I see now, close up, I didn't get everything. Kind of have to rub it off with my finger. Still stuck, but it's about as close as I can get. I'll never do it that way again. I know better now to line the tablespoon with a sandwich baggie. So let's see, what's the next step? Oh, I was going to heat the water. No. Where's my cup? Uh-oh. I'm a little mixed up. I think I blew it. I gotta start all over again. I think I poured in the extra hot water into this cup. So now I gotta pour this out, rinse it out, probably rinse out both of them. This one too. Dry it out, and rinse out and dry out both these mugs. I better cover this to keep the heat in the crock pot. Because I think this one has the borax, so I'm going to have to remeasure the borax. Yeah, I kind of blew it. Oh well, whatever. Okay. First things first. Empty out and clean these cups. Okay. I've got my borax, got my 1/4 teaspoon of borax. Put it in the cup. Open up the crock pot. Oh, now this is going to take 3 hands. Ooh, it's changed. Oh, I see. All the bubbles have risen to the surface. So I've placed a tablespoon of MSM in here, and it's forced some of the excess hydrogen peroxide to come out of solution and rise to the surface. And so I've got all kinds of bubbles there that weren't there before, and the solution is more clear. You can see through it. So it's still a kind of gray, milky white. I could almost add hydrogen peroxide again, just to play it safe. You know, that's what I think I'm going to do. I'm going to have an excess of hydrogen peroxide in here. So I've already added 2 scoops of 30 cc's each of hydrogen peroxide. I'm going to add a half a scoop, 15 cc's, just to make sure I have an excess of hydrogen peroxide immediately before measuring out my 1/4 cup into that cup with borax. Just to play it safe, because I want to play it safe. So, see, how do I do this? Well, for one thing, I'll put this down. I have too many things on the table here. That's my problem. It's taking up space. Way too much space. Okay. Much better. Let's see. Alrighty. Okay, so what I'm going to have to do is get the tripod. Is that the way I'm going to do it? Let me think. No, I'll try and wing it without the tripod here. Yeah. A good trick to start your cell phone camera is to use the tip of your nose. Alright, I've got less than half, maybe a third, so that would be 10 cc's. I want to see if it changes color as I pour it in. Looks the same as before. At least I know I have an excess. For safety's sake, I guess. It's the best I can do. It looks like it's clouded up ever so slightly. The real mistake is still kind of grayish, is that I ran the machine too long, putting too much silver in the very first stage when I was making the colloidal silver. So you really can't overdo it, because you'll end up with silver that's has not been oxidized, because it can't be, because the osmotic pressure is so great it can't sustain the hydrogen peroxide reacting with the silver to oxidize it. Especially now that I've put MSM in here, it's almost forced some of that oxygen out of, or peroxide, out of solution. So instead of a white coloration as it was before, now it's turned slightly gray. So I want MSM, I don't want to avoid it, but it does test the situation and verify, or diagnose, I should say, diagnose the situation so that I know I made it too long, too rich. But I'm going to be very cautious. Instead of reducing the time that I spent running the machine, making the colloidal silver in the first place, I won't reduce it by an hour. I'll just reduce it by half an hour. And be very cautious, because I want as much silver as possible, but I want all of it to be oxidized. So this is just the hazard of having overindulged myself. So now I'm going to take my 1/4 cup and I'm going to turn this yogurt container upside down to make this a little higher. There we go. So now I have it side by side. I'll be able to quickly transfer and put it in the crock pot. Alright, I got my 1/4 cup. So far so good. Looks clear. Alright, we'll heat that up. Put the lid on. Well, I could put it on high now. So I'll put that on high. So when that gets done, the next step will be... Oh, I have to prepare the wax. So everything looks fine so far, so I'm going to prepare the wax and the oil in a mug. I'll dry out this mug, and I'll combine the half a cup of coconut oil with a tablespoon of wax. So I'll prepare it in this gizmo I have set up here. It's good to have shavings of wax prepared, so then you can use your thumb to press it in here. I'm busy pressing it in. It's working out pretty good. Okay, I've managed to press a slightly rounded tablespoon's worth of beeswax into the tablespoon lined with the sandwich baggie, and I did it slightly more than a level tablespoon because of the gaps. I can see various gaps in there, so if this were to melt down, it might level out. And the knife came in very handy in prying the wax loose, gouging it out of the cup into chunks that I could then press in with my thumb, and I had to use my other thumb on top of this thumb to really press it in. So now I can put this in a dry cup and add half a cup of coconut oil, and that'll be ready for when the water with borax, the silver hydroperoxide with borax heats up. Then I'll swap that out and put the oil and wax in there. And then I might want to take the oil out when it's done and put the water back in and reheat it again, because the volume of water is less than the volume of oil and wax. So actually I should have done the oil first, is what I should have done, and followed it with the water. I'm not so sure about that. No, this might be the right way, because I want to make sure the oil and wax does not cool. That would cause the wax to solidify before I mix it with the borax and water solution. So I'm doing it right. I do the water first, and then the oil and the water and the silver water and borax first, followed by heating up the. Of course, if I could heat both at the same time in a much larger double boiler, that would be ideal. Okay, I've got the glob of wax floating there. 1 tablespoon of wax floating in half a cup of coconut oil, and then I took the measuring thing and I put it in a container. I'm going to put soap and water in that to soak it before I clean it. Well, I swapped cups and I took out the silver water with borax and I put in the oil and the beeswax, and unfortunately I have to report, if I put on my gloves, it turned gray, turned black in fact. So it's the heating that caused it to change color. It was clear when I first put it in there. So you can even see silver sitting on the bottom of the cup. It precipitated out of solution. So basically I have silver that came out of solution. If this were in a glass, we'd see better what it looks like. So essentially we're just going to have silver particles in the lotion. It'll be evenly distributed, and that's a little better than what the article on the National Institute of Health website described. Silver particles embedded in beeswax, so it won't be ions of silver. I don't know how to make that happen, so it's the best I can do. At least I tried. I tried a different silver solution, but it didn't do any good. At least this time it has MSM, and I'm following the recipe. I'm following the recipe this time instead of just throwing the ingredients together, because I'm not trying to avoid the use of oil like I was trying to do last time. So that'll cool somewhat. Meanwhile, the oil and beeswax is heating up over there, and so we'll let that heat up. Well, it looks like all the wax has dissolved. So now I put the water, the silver water with borax back in to reheat, and just about all the silver is sunk to the bottom, unfortunately. So I should never have heated it before doing the oil. I should have left it for last. I think I'm going to stir it with something. What should I stir it with? Probably a plastic. It might, well, I think I'll swirl it. Actually, I think I'll pour the oil into the water and I'll mix it in there. That's what I'll do. So, rather than the other way around. I mean, normally you would think you'd pour the water into the oil, but because the silver has sunk to the base, excuse me, because the silver has sunk to the base, I'm going to use that container to put my stick blender in there to bring the silver up to the surface and mix it all around. So I'll pour the oil out of here and into there after it reheats. Hopefully this won't cool too much while it's sitting out here. I don't know how else to keep this warm, actually. As you recall, now I had forgotten I was going to mix it in this yogurt container. And now I realize the stuff is hot. I'm not going to melt the plastic. So I got out my my Pyrex. These are not immune from heat. These are not borosilicate like they used to be. Pyrex used to be borosilicate. This is borosilicate. So that would have been the safe thing to put it in. If I put it in here, it might crack. But I have to. I don't have much choice. So I'm reheating the water, and I'll pour. What I'm going to have to do is, oh, I know. I'll use my wooden stir stick to stir the silver up from the base. Hopefully it won't. I'll be able to get it all up from the base, and then pour both the oil and the water into here and mix both in there. Well, I definitely got things backwards. The silver really sank to the bottom big time, and I'm going to have to re-stir it all over again once it finishes heating. So that tells me that we have to leave the heating of the borax and silver solution for very last, and heat the oil and wax first, and then mix the two together. It's the only way to do it properly. Well, I decided to do all my mixing in the crock pot. I got my, it just fits this Pyrex 1 quart. I immersed it. It's got water it's sitting in. I put in the silver water and I poured in the oil and wax, and you can see it's already emulsified somewhat. So let's start it mixing away. Let's see if I can get a handle on this. I bet that's as good as it gets. I should actually take this out and let it cool while I do this. Let me stop the camera. Like making ice cream. Doesn't look like lotion. It just looks like goo. I think it has to cool down. So I guess the idea is similar to ice cream. We're putting air bubbles inside of it as it cools. I've noticed that the oil-wax combination is already solidified here on the side of the jar. So it just needs to cool, that's all. So I'll keep stirring it here. And I bet it'll add more air bubbles as it cools. And of course adding air should cool it down as well, because it's cool air. Except it doesn't seem to be doing anything. Whoops. Ooh, is it hot? No wonder it's not frothing up. I think I'm going to have to wait. A little bit. Ooh, is that hot? I'm going to have to wait. I better not wait too much, though. Let's see if this is sticky or oh no, this is hard. This wax is hard. Well, it's moist. It's moist with oil, but it's hard. So it's just a question of letting it cool. Yeah, that's really hot. I'm going to wait a few minutes. Well, I'm cleaning it up. I finished. It's not going to get any more frothy, and the cooler it gets, the more solid it becomes. And it's got a nice stiffness to it. As you can see, it seems to hold its shape very nicely, which is very interesting. So when you follow the recipe, it turns out pretty good. So I'm using the back end of plastic spoons to try to take it out of here. And by the way, I got these little cups from the 99. Actually, they were from the Dollar Tree, I believe. Or maybe not. Maybe they were from the 99-cent store. Well, I finished. I cleaned out the bowl, and it looks like each of these cups is about 2 ounces in size. So it looks like I've managed to mix 4 ounces worth of material, which is how much oil there was. So what happened to the water? Well, that's funny. The water was a 1/4 cup. The oil was 1/2 cup, plus we have air in there. Well, yeah, probably some air. Maybe these are 3 ounces. No, they don't look like 3 ounces. Anyway, they just fit. And it's got a nice stiff appearance. Sorry, I'm not looking in my camera. I'm too busy looking at the objects themselves. You know, it's kind of semi-stiff. I'm sure it'll stiffen up, especially when I put it in the fridge. It'll stiffen up even more. It's really a nice consistency, more or less. So I'm really happy with it. And especially knowing that, of course, borax is healthy for us. And silver and MSM adds. It can only add to the benefit of using this on wounds. This is for wound care to help keep a wound from drying out, because the one thing you learn studying Dr. Robert Becker's material in his book The Body Electric and his patent at tinyurl.com/Becker-patent is the importance of moisture. You have to keep the wound moist at all times, if nothing else, although it helps to add silver or electricity or both. In this case, we're going to be adding silver and sulfur in the form of MSM, silver in the form of silver particles, because that was the best I could do. And of course, coconut oil, which is a good moisturizer. And borax, which is good for all kinds of things. You can look it up on YouTube. There's so many videos on people talking about borax. So I'd say this is a grand improvement over what was already a great recipe to begin with. I just added a few things, silver and MSM, and the rest is pretty much according to recipe. So there you go. Whoopie-doo. Wow. Well, I just realized, what do you need preservative for in the form of grapefruit seed extract when it's already got silver in there? The problem, of course, is that the silver is not nano-sized particles anymore. It's large-sized particles, which actually are not effective in being antimicrobial. So how do we get silver in there? I think I know the answer. When we mix the two batches, let's pan out a little here. We take the silver hydroperoxide at room temperature. It's got the MSM added to it, and we, measure out a 1/4 cup, mix it with a 1/4 teaspoon of borax until the borax is thoroughly dissolved, but it's still at room temperature, and then right away add it to the hot oil melted wax combination and whip it up with the stick blender. And hopefully the waxy portion of that oil-wax blend will not solidify too rapidly, nor possibly will the silver have a chance to come out of solution and precipitate into large-sized particles, because it takes a little time for that, a few minutes. So if all of this is done within a matter of seconds, in fact, we could chill this, measure it out, dissolve the borax, chill it, pre-chill it, and maybe it'd be even better. I don't know, but I would start with room temperature first. So there's still some tweakings, or I should say some experimentation, because we don't know if it'll be successful, to see if we can tweak this recipe or procedure of the recipe so that the silver does not come out of solution and form large-size aggregate particles, which are useless for antibacterial purposes. But it takes time for that to happen. So if we rush things along and chill this fluid, or at least keep it at room temperature, it just might work. Who knows? More experimentation is needed. We're getting there, little by little.